Well, here it is, the blue pill. Hey guys, this is Jules with True Crime Reactions. Disclaimer. Everything stated in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. And just like everything else in these cases we discuss here on this channel, everything is alleged. When it comes to the Idaho student murder case, or really when it comes to anything based on fact that would shake up the world a little bit, when it comes to channels like mine and other people who talk about things of fact, from court documents to the things that are actually talked about in court in front of a judge between the two parties, to actual case evidence, to things with actual backing and receipts and legs to stand on, we would be called the red pill channels. We give you the reality. We don't dance around it, sugarcoat it, and we do not believe that ignorance is bliss here, or at least we don't believe that that's how you should live. Channels that go along with the blue pill situation, where you really just go along with their narrative. You don't think for yourself. You think that they are doing what is best by you and have your best interest at heart. So you just believe the talking heads on the TV and you don't do your own research. You just believe in the narrative. You don't believe that there are any problems in the background. You don't sit there having so many questions just wafting around in your head 24/7 because something just doesn't sound right. You listen to what they tell you and you just go on about your lives, like the good little slave you are. What we've come to realize in the Idaho student murder case is that when it comes to how the Moscow Police Department actually obtained the name and information for Bryan Kohberger, the truth is going to be eliminated. They have already picked exactly who I thought they were going to pick, Officer Payne, as the person to get on the stand and lie under oath. And instead of the judge actually making a choice when it comes to how this is going to be sanitized and presented to the jury, so that the FBI's information for that 1219 phone call is completely just gone from the narrative, he's going to allow the two sides to figure out how the lie is going to be actually orchestrated, meaning that the defense is going to be just as responsible for the lie that comes out as the state is. Nonetheless, it's going to be a lie. Now, this is already being very well fed into the media. I was really surprised by how just in my face the CW did this, and I was honestly not surprised at all for the people that were in it and involved, except for Brian Inton. Sometimes I see him do things and report on stories where I'm like, damn, you really got to give him his attaboys. But then I see him do stuff like this, and I'm like, dude, you know better. Why are you going with this narrative? It's pretty gross, honestly, the kind of crap that came out of this episode. They're lying about almost everything. The way that they faded in and out of information, lied about what Dylan was actually doing, the way that they put the IGG information in and then just go straight to, oh, they're watching him in Pennsylvania. They literally, they've started the sanitization. The way that this is being laid out in this episode is exactly how it's going to end up coming out in court. And there's a reason why this narrative is out here like this right now. So I'm going to give you a rundown of what I thought about this pathetic episode, and then we're going to go look at the comments because I'm not the only one frustrated. Now, first off, they start by getting Xana's name wrong. They call her Xana. Xana is not her name. You'd think after making money off of these victim stories for so long, they could at least get their names right. I just don't understand how something so simple can be so difficult for some people. They don't say that it's a private driver or go into the information about Eric Gower in the situation. They just state that Maddie and Kaylee went home from a ride. Just a ride home. That's it. They also claim that Xana and Ethan got home at the exact same time that Maddie and Kaylee did. So after all this time and all of the opposite information that we've been getting and all the back and forth information that we've been getting, that actually doesn't prove that whatsoever because of all the silence truly surrounding Xana and Ethan's timeline. Okay, we don't know that is actually a fact. They're going based off of a probable cause order that's already been deemed irrelevant and completely useless for literally everything. Literally everything. While mentioning the back-to-back calls from Jack Ducour from Maddie and Kaylee's phone, they're not mentioning the fact that Maddie also calls Bethany. That's new information that we've got released from both sides when it comes to the text messages and the activity between the victims' phones and the two surviving roommates' phones from the entire 8-hour gap between the time of the event and the 911 call. There's a lot of that information that they are not addressing, and they definitely would have had time to put it in. They say that Xana made the food order, and that's actually not ever what was said. We've talked about the DoorDash order a lot here on this channel, pretty in depth, and a lot here recently. Now, we were told that Xana obtained the DoorDash at approximately 4 o'clock in the morning. That's been the original story, and something that we didn't even know about until after Bryan Kohberger's arrest and the affidavit was actually released. What we've learned is the exact time was 3:59 a.m. The initials of the DoorDash driver are MM, the same as one of the victims, Maddie Mogen's initials, that the order actually was Jack in the Box, be it maybe or maybe not the Jack in the Box that we've seen photos of taken by mainstream media in the kitchen, and it wasn't actually made by Xana. Nothing about Xana is mentioned at all in the order because it actually came from Ethan's account. Now, whenever I put the coordinates from the DoorDash information into just regular old Google Maps, it does show you what looks to be where the backsliding glass door was before a 1122 King Road was actually demolished. Now, if this is just showing me the plot of land and that just might be where the dot is, or if it is actually where the dot is, I'm not really quite sure. I'm just showing in a previous video what it shows because we don't really know. That's one of those things about this that we don't have any actual facts about because for some reason we're not allowed to know the truth about the DoorDash order right now. It's too top secret. Now, Inton was one of the first people on the ground. He's not wrong about that. But he's claiming that the police were telling him even back then that the crime happened sometime after 4 o'clock in the morning. And honestly, that's not the timeline that was given to the public at all when it came to the information that they were seeking. Again, it wasn't until after Bryan Kohberger's arrest and the affidavit for his arrest was released that the timeline became sometime after 4 o'clock in the morning. Before that, the way that the information was coming out about the grub truck, the girls getting home, what they were claiming about Xana and Ethan also getting home, the information coming from the back-to-back phone calls, a lot of other things that were being released were alluding to a timeline prior to 4 o'clock in the morning. So the shift was shocking to the public. So if Inton was being told that, why wasn't the public being told that? I don't think he was being told that. I think that's one of his paid narrative things, but again, that's just my opinion. They also state that the girls found the victims and then called friends over. And that's not at all what took place here. We actually just went into a live and went back over the text message and 911 call information that was talked about in court. And we heard Jennings literally lie twice by claiming that what Hunter Johnson found once he got Xana's door open was the reason for the 911 call, which matches the original story that we did get from the Goncalves family. But that's not what's happening on the 911 call. On the 911 call, we're being told that they just believe that Xana is passed out and way too intoxicated from the night before because of all of the drinking from the night before. That's the main story being said out of not Dylan's mouth, not Bethany's mouth, but Emily's mouth, someone that was called over to the house by the girls. And this Emily, she went up the first set of stairs to the top of the stairs, right at the second floor, did not walk around, just up at the top of the stairs, turned right around, left the house, and never went back inside. So she would have never seen anything. Dylan and Bethany at this point are not really quite sure, according to how they're portraying their information on the 911 call, what exactly is going on. And it's not until halfway through the 911 call that you hear Hunter Johnson actually yelling out Xana and Ethan's names before then yelling, "Get out, get out, get out," because of whatever he has now seen. The situation is being portrayed differently and incorrectly in court, and Jennings did this twice, back to back. That is not what is on the 911 call. The facts are right there. So why they're keeping up that narrative, I don't know, because it's not true. And the proof is right there in their own submitted evidence that it's not true. Now, again, we have a discrepancy about the grub truck footage and who actually found it and when. A bunch of people have taken credit, but we originally heard from the Goncalves family that Eric, the driver who actually took Maddie and Kaylee home, is the one that informed them of it, and Olivia is the one who found it. Then we had the police come out and take claim for being the ones who found it. And then there was a documentary in which somebody that was actually real friends with Xana and Ethan that works for a local news station said in his portion of the interview that him and his team at the local station were actually the ones that found it. So who knows? Everyone probably found it at around the same time. Let's be so for real. I just find it funny, I guess, that in almost every time it's talked about, the person who's getting the credit for it changes. Now, in this, they are literally stating that they know for a fact that the intruder, and in their narrative, Bryan Kohberger, went in through the back sliding glass door. When has that ever been stated by anyone of authority? We have heard since before the gag order was placed, and nothing has changed as far as we know at this point. And again, there is a gag order. But prior to that, they were telling us that there was no way that they could actually tell which way the person or persons came in and out that house because there was no trail. There was no trail of blood outside. There was no trail of blood in between the two crime scenes from Xana and Ethan's spot to where Maddie and Kaylee were then found. There was nothing leading in between those things. So it was impossible for them to be able to actually tell. Now, granted, there's only a few different ways you can actually go about this, but they are proving and stating no forced entry and in just assuming based off of what Dylan is claiming to have seen based on direction that at that point the person was leaving, but it doesn't state the person actually left and was seen leaving. It's all just assumption. So if that's never changed and it's been based off nothing but assumption of the direction Dylan might have seen the person maybe walking towards, that doesn't actually give you a fact of anything. One of the people on this claims that Dylan was texting her roommates to be quiet. I don't remember ever hearing that she was texting them to be quiet or to keep it down. The narrative that we were told from the very beginning, like within like 3 days of this even being announced, before we even knew everyone's names, what we were told is that one of the girls that were left alive that night ended up opening the door and yelling to shut the F up the stairs because there was lots of noise coming from upstairs. Now, what we've also learned from the information about what happened and what was said in some of Dylan's interviews is that she thought it was some sort of after party situation because she heard singing and music. And there's also portions to where she thought that maybe it was just one of Ethan and or Xana's friends about to leave when it came to the person that she's claiming that she saw that night. So I don't know how it turned into an after party and oh, it's probably just one of my roommate's friends leaving for the night to now I'm seeing firemen holding something that looks like a vacuum. That's really just from one end of the spectrum to the other. And I honestly just don't know how this Vanity Fair chick even has a job being any sort of reporter or writer or journalist or anything. She says straight to the camera that Dylan stayed in her room the entire time before calling 911 8 hours later. So we're just going to ignore the fact that her and Bethany were speaking to each other at the time that all this stuff was going on, that both of them were acknowledging emotions of fear and freaking out during whatever they're claiming is happening here. We're just going to ignore the fact that Dylan left her bedroom and went down to Bethany's bedroom. We're just going to ignore the fact that her phone activity shows that she didn't stop doing anything ever, that it's constant for 8 hours and she never slept. We're just going to ignore all of that. Okay. And at one point, they even say that Dylan was yelling at Murphy to stop barking. We haven't heard anyone even mention anything about Murphy. Now, granted, the information that we have received with phone calls and text messages and stuff like that, we were told that that's not all of it. So there could be more. There could be stuff about Murphy, especially since we're being told here recently in court by Ann Taylor that same camera listed as the 417 timestamp in the probable cause order picks up Murphy barking for another half hour after suspect vehicle 1 leaves at 4:20. And according to testing, he was barking outside. And then it just abruptly stops, meaning at some point somebody would have had to have gotten up and let that dog in the house. So you're up and you're walking around, the dog's barking, you're not wondering why Kaylee isn't getting up and letting her dog back in, and if one of the girls actually were the ones to get up and let Murphy in from wherever he actually was. You don't think they went to like look and see why in the world Kaylee is ignoring her dog? None of that makes any sense. You just can't ignore the whole situation with Murphy and think that there's just some innocence left between Bethany and Dylan. I'm sorry, there's just no way. They also claim that the first arriving officer is who saw the knife sheath, and that's not true either. At least not with what we've been told. Now, there's body cam stuff that we haven't seen, but the way that the knife sheath is being brought to our attention is from the officers that showed up hours later, around 4 o'clock. Payne and Blaker. They showed up at around the time that ISP was beginning to get ready to start processing the scene. And again, as copy and paste as their PCAs are, there's a difference in what happened with the visibility of the knife sheath. I'll make a video on just that pretty soon here. And we have never been told that one of the first responding officers actually saw the knife sheath. Now, granted, given the fact that there is a 4 hour time span between the 911 call and whenever we do hear an officer get on scene and 4 p.m., whenever these two, whatever they want to call themselves, actually show up, it wouldn't surprise me if people did see the knife sheath way prior to them two showing up, but that's not anything that we've ever been told before. They talk about the vehicles, and of course, they want to make it as if it's only Bryan Kohberger's vehicle, but they don't mention the fact that they were looking for 7 different makes and models, some of them also being Nissans. They really didn't have anything definitive until after they had Bryan Kohberger's name. They didn't know which way to really go until then. There's a reason for that. Now, I noticed that this starts going in the same order that they have things in the PCA. One thing that we need to remember for those of us out here who actually pay attention to what is said in court is that the 1129 car query for the white Hyundai Elantra at WSU, and then where the officer actually showed up at the Steptoe apartment parking lot and had eyes on Bryan Kohberger's car that was similar to what they were looking for, that information was never looked at, never caught up with, never checked on, followed up on, none of the freaking things, okay? It was never even acknowledged until after they had Bryan Kohberger's name on 12/19. This was said in court by the defense, and Ann Taylor claims to have correspondence proving this. So they cannot say that they had Bryan's information as of 11/29 because of this car thing and they just went with that and just led the investigation to him from there, because that's not true. They have the proof. They have the emails. They have the conversations proving that nobody even checked into that stuff until after MPD got that call from the FBI. Now, at this point, they're making it sound as if the DNA situation is just being handled off in the background, but it's not like gonna mean anything because they've got all these other things happening at the exact same time. But we know that that's not the facts. We know that that's not actually true whatsoever. Then this is where I got really confused about what they were doing. And if they just had missing information, flip-flop information, and they just all collectively had it wrong, I don't know what's going on with this. They are mentioning the traffic stop at WSU a lot in this for reasons that don't make any sense to me. Because the traffic stop that's being admitted as 404 evidence is the one from Moscow, Idaho from August of 2022. The one that happened in Pullman was from October of 2022 and was in Washington and had nothing at all to do with Idaho. So they're bringing up the October traffic stop, but then also talking about how this is how they actually got Bryan's information and his phone number and stuff like that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? No, they are literally talking about the fact, the entire reason behind the traffic stop for Moscow being admitted is for that information, for the phone number, for his name, for his address, for the type of car, for those types of identification and verification purposes. But they're putting all of those things while talking about the October stop in Washington that's not even part of this evidence whatsoever. So I don't know why they did that, but it's wrong. All of it is wrong. They bring up the girl that he went on the date with, the birthing hip girl. And obviously, I don't really care about any of that stuff. And honestly, do we even know if she was legit? Like, did they have her log into her profile and show the profile that she was talking to and prove that the profile actually belonged to Bryan Kohberger? Or did they just take her word for it because they wanted ratings? Was her story ever actually proven? Were there receipts given? And the same thing when it comes to the bar story. There's a bar story from back in Pennsylvania where he apparently was getting in trouble for saying things to women that they didn't like. And the bartender apparently came out and told somebody at some point that they had a picture of his ID behind the bar and the big old warning thing and blah, 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 blah. But whenever other people were calling them to get receipts and get proof that it was actually Bryan Kohberger's ID and actually validate the information, there was no response. So again, are these just stories that people are taking and not actually getting any proof for, and they're just running with it because of ratings? Or are they actually true? None of these things have been actually substantiated. It's just like whenever the Goncalveses came out and tried to state that Bryan Kohberger was stalking one or more of the girls on social media. But every time these big name networks would let them talk about it, there would be a disclaimer up in the corner about how they haven't been able to prove that these things are true. And then we find out from the state that none of it's true. There's no connections on social media and he wasn't stalking them. We're in this exact same situation again. Where's the proof of these things? Whenever the proof is being asked for, we just get silence. Now here comes Banfeld comparing him to Elliot Rogers and calling him an incel and all the things. And then this sort of goes into the Facebook groups. And these two women that adminned a big Facebook group that Papa Rogers was really big in start talking. And they start mentioning about how the Facebook profile picture of Papa Rogers does resemble Bryan Kohberger, and they're not wrong. And they're comparing the name Papa Rogers to Elliot Rogers, and maybe in their mind it's Bryan Kohberger wanting to be one up to Elliot Rogers because he wants to be the ultimate incel, getting the ultimate revenge, and all these things. Okay, it's their own theories, their own words. Now, I didn't actually know that whenever Papa Rogers got kicked out of that big group that he created his own group. I didn't know that at all. Now, one thing that they did state that was not true is that that account has been inactive since Bryan Kohberger was arrested, and that's not true. That account has definitely been active since Bryan Kohberger was arrested. We've talked about it here on this channel. I believe it's come back at least twice. I don't know if anything's been posted, but information on the background had been updated. Like at one point, everyone could see that it had like female pronouns on the information in the background that had recently been updated. So I don't know if somebody's just messing around with the account or what's going on. Some people just want to assume that it was Bryan Kohberger because of the resemblance and all the crazy coincidences, and I can see why they want to think that. But just because it stopped after he was arrested doesn't necessarily mean anything. The person could have just lost interest in posting about it once there was an arrest and just moved on to the next thing. You just never know. Humans do human things. Dot's actually somebody named Braden who likes to troll true crime cases, for those who need a reminder. What I also find funny is that Brian Inton is entertaining all of this, all while stating that there's no evidence and there's never been anything mentioned about Papa Rogers in literally anything when it comes to evidence. But, the story sounds good, so he entertains it. Now, when it comes to the Indiana traffic stops, you guys do need to remember that the feds were taking credit for that for the first like 3 days. And then all of a sudden they were like, oh no, it wasn't us. But we pretty much know that it was definitely them. They had the family tree, they had information, they had all of the DNA stuff by December the 10th. So for them to be orchestrating for him to be getting pulled over in Indiana 5 days after getting the information and having days to do more work, I mean, it tracks. Especially if they were actually trying to catch up with him themselves, because on top of them originally taking credit for those stops, they also admitted to losing him for a few days. So there is that. And then we also know that there was some sort of situation that happened in Pennsylvania at a CVS on the 16th, so just the next day, where law enforcement saw him walking in and out of the CVS, and then some of his information was obtained from those exact same law enforcement officers that watched him walk in and out, is how it was described. And to me, and in my opinion, based on the timing and the fact that it wasn't until sometime after the 20th that the Pennsylvania authorities were actually told about what was going on, I'm going to assume it was Fed detail watching him walk in and out of the CVS. Now, they mention the traffic stops on 12/15, and then they slip in the IGG stuff. This is like the only time they actually mention it. And all they say is that they found a family tree. Nothing else is mentioned. It's also not even being mentioned in the right timing because, again, they're mentioning the Indiana stops on the 15th and then sliding this in there.
Officers never ticketed Kohberger for any traffic violations, and they let him go.
Upon arrival in Pennsylvania, authorities were keeping an eye on Kohberger.
DNA extracted from the knife she found at the crime scene didn't yet point to one particular individual, but helped investigators establish a family profile.
If they only do have that touch DNA and that one piece of genetic evidence, they are going to need other evidence to help back that up. They have to collect DNA directly from that individual and compare it against the court-admissible genetic profile. Court-admissible genetic profile.
At the time, Bryan Kohberger was staying at his parents' house.
The first thing they look to do is retrieve discarded household trash.
Why would somebody be wearing gloves when they're putting up the garbage or cleaning their car?
So police were able to get the family's trash.
They pulled that DNA from Bryan Kohberger's parents' house and it didn't match the suspect. Let's run a paternity comparison. And they got the match then.
So again, they go from the 12/15 traffic stops to barely mentioning some genetic stuff happening and a family tree with nothing else specific to now they're looking to get trash samples from his parents' home in Pennsylvania. That's how they're trying to flow this entire thing. Now, Cece Moore comes in here and starts talking about the trash and how they pulled familial DNA and how they basically wanted to just match that to the knife sheath DNA, and that's how they got the paternal match, and voila, that's how they knew they had their man. And that's just not the actual timeline of events. Yes, that did happen. There was a trash pool. There was no sneaky trash thing either. They are trying to portray it as if Kohberger's parents just weren't paying enough attention to their life around them and allowed the cops to just sneak up in their yard and steal their trash. That's how the little movie clip is playing in this, okay? And that's not what happened. What we were told is that the trash truck actually went in there, took the trash, met up with the authorities after they ran the truck through the entire whatever the frick they felt they needed to in order to do this. And then from how it sounds from the transcript from the closed session from the January hearings, an entire bag of trash was basically shipped off to ISP, and they dug around and found stuff to test. And it wasn't just his dad's DNA. There was portions of his own DNA that were found in there too, but there was a mixture of female DNA also in his DNA. So they basically just went with the paternal match from knife sheath to Michael Kohberger. But again, if they did not have the match that was given to them on 12/19, they would have never been in Pennsylvania. Those traffic stops in Indiana, the stuff that was seen happening at CVS on the 16th, none of those things would have happened by the feds if they didn't already have his name. So really what I'd kind of like to know is if they got the information on the 10th and they have him being pulled over twice in Indiana on the 15th, when exactly in between the 10th and the 15th did they actually know who they were precisely looking at? And what was it that took them 4 more days to then contact MPD and give them the name? What was the difference? What was the, I guess, verifying factor? Because we haven't found that out either. They also go on to say that by all accounts, the surviving roommates are traumatized. Well, that's not what we've heard. That's not what we've heard at all. They don't even remember, or at least Dylan doesn't even really remember what she saw. She doesn't even know how the person she saw was white. She just knows he was white. She just doesn't know how. And, you know, all the bushy eyebrow art on her wall magically also matches the description of the person that she claims to have seen until, again, a few weeks later when it goes from a guy in a black shirt and black pants and black boots to a fireman holding a vacuum. Because, again, how does any of that make sense or even equal the same thing? Again, it was the way that they flowed the IGG completely out of this. They made it almost completely irrelevant. They never mentioned at all that they ever even came down to his actual name coming out from those results. And we know that that's exactly what happened. So they're going to lie. They're going to lie their asses off about how they actually got Bryan Kohberger's name. And we're supposed to just sit here and pretend like we don't know the truth. The millions of us that actually do. We're supposed to watch this trial happen in front of a jury of people that are supposed to be pretty much blank slates when it comes to this case and watch them get lied to. And we're supposed to just sit back and not say anything. How is this what the American justice system has actually become? But that's really it. That's all I have to say about this CW video. Again, I was really just appalled by Brian Enton and the way that he just went along with this. It's definitely expected from Trashley Banfield. But from Enton, he has reported on a lot of things that I really do commend him for. Stuff that seems really dangerous, stuff that he's really sort of risking talking about, risking a lot talking about. And then he does this. And I'm just like, dude, you're like, you portray yourself as being better than this, but then somehow you slip. I just wish he would be really honest, because he's definitely not being honest here, literally at all, and it's sad. Now, before I close this off, I wanted to show you guys some comments, because it wasn't just me. I went in and saw some of these comments before I watched it, and I was like, dang, I pretty much know exactly what I'm about to put myself right in the middle of. So this first one was, so disrespectful to not even pronounce Xana's name right. It's not a hard name to pronounce, and it's all over TikTok videos of this case. There's no excuse. It's like Anna at the end. Do better and respect her. Xana. Not Xana. Xana. Another, can you at least get the victim's first names correct? It's Xana. A documentary before trial is wild. There's been so much of this too, it's actually insane. This comment says, I have no idea when this documentary was made, but I'm only 4.5 minutes in and there is already incorrect information being told. Not to mention, 2 people so far pronounce Xana's name wrong. It's going to be difficult to continue, but at this point, I'm curious what else they got wrong. So many things. That's why I made this video. This one says, I cannot believe all of these documentaries, media, individuals that are shouting this man's guilt and stating opinions as facts when the trial has not even started. What I don't get is when they called 911, they kept saying that their roommate wouldn't wake up. They couldn't get the roommate awake instead of telling the operator what they were really seeing. Why? That's what I don't understand either. And I just feel like it's because they weren't really seeing anything. I think that's all crap. This comment says, we know the roommates were not sleeping. That is a fact. And their text messaging, videos, photos they took, and calls they made prove they were not asleep. You should report fact, not fiction. Yeah, they shouldn't be telling people that Dylan stayed in her room the entire time. That's a freaking lie. This needs to be updated with true facts. Years later, y'all still can't pronounce Xana's name. The amount of effort the media is putting to sidetrack this case is unbelievable. God help our justice system. If you are going to do a documentary, get the facts right. Ethan's sister is his triplet, not twin, and stop pronouncing Xana's name wrong. This is the worst coverage of this I have watched. The constant music and sound effects are distracting and unnecessary, and some of your experts sound like idiots. One can't even pronounce Xana's name correctly. You can tell how much that bothers the ever-living shit out of so many of us. This comment says, all of you should lose your jobs for putting this misinformation out there. This is just a shame. This next one says, 90% crap. Anyone that really follows this case was screaming at the TV the whole time this was on. Yeah, for sure. Oh, look, someone actually caught it. I believe they got his phone number from the August 21st traffic stop, not the October stop. Exactly. So I don't know why they went off so hard about the October stop and got the information about it completely wrong. All of them got it completely wrong collectively. But I do agree that this was one of the worst regurgitations of this information that I've seen in such a long time. Now, people get it wrong a lot. They have opinions that vary from mine, and that's completely different than getting information wrong. They are out here spreading false information, incorrect information, in order to push a narrative that does not exist in reality. That's the problem. They're wanting to avoid the truth, and they are using big names in mainstream and other people that have some sort of connection to this case in order to push that false, sanitized lie. It's just disgusting. I want to know how you guys are feeling about all of this down in the comments. If you like the way that I present this information and give my opinion, please don't forget to leave a like on the way out. Subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed already. And please don't forget to make sure that that notification bell is set to all so you don't miss any of my rants, reviews, reactions, updates, or deep dives. See y'all.